The silver ship of Earth drifted through the dark sea of stars, glowing like a small candle in endless night. Inside, Captain Ethan Walker stood by the viewing window, his eyes steady as he watched the alien world grow larger in front of him. This was not just another planet. This was the capital of the Zephyrian Empire, one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Millions of humans back on Earth were waiting for this meeting. It was more than politics. It was survival. The Zephyrian Empire had the strength to crush humanity if they wished. But Earth was hoping for peace, hoping to prove that even a young race could be worthy of respect. Ethan, chosen as a representative, carried the weight of all his people on his shoulders. When the ship landed in the grand docking bay of the alien palace, Ethan took a deep breath. He was not the tallest or the strongest man. He was simply steady, calm, and unwilling to break under pressure. Perhaps that was why the Council of Earth had chosen him. The palace was unlike anything he had ever seen. Towers of crystal stretched into the sky, glowing with soft blue light. Bridges of silver hung in the air as if gravity itself bent before the will of the Zephyrians. Thousands of alien citizens gathered to see the arrival of the human delegate. Their eyes, glowing faintly with golden rings, followed his every step. Ethan could feel the weight of their stares, but he did not lower his gaze. He walked with quiet dignity, as if he belonged even though he knew he was only a guest here. Inside the palace, the air shimmered with floating orbs of light. The great hall was filled with alien nobles dressed in flowing garments that shone like liquid metal. At the center of it all stood the Empress, tall and graceful, her crown carved from living crystal. By her side stood someone who caught Ethan's attention instantly, Princess Liara. She was young compared to the other Zephyrians, her silver blue skin glowing faintly under the hall lights. Her long hair shimmered like a river under moonlight, and her eyes held a sharpness that reminded Ethan of the endless stars outside. Yet behind that sharpness there was something else: loneliness. The Empress greeted Ethan formally, her voice calm but powerful. "Human representative, you stand before the Zephyrian court. Speak carefully, for your words carry the weight of your people." Ethan bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty, I come in peace, not as a threat. Humanity wishes for friendship and understanding, not war." Whispers filled the hall. Many nobles tilted their heads, some skeptical, some amused. To them, humans were a weak young species, barely out of their homeworld. But the Empress only studied Ethan in silence. Then, as Ethan lifted his eyes, they met the gaze of the princess. It was only for a moment, but it felt longer. Her golden-ringed eyes locked onto his deep brown ones, and for the first time in her life, Princess Liara felt unsettled. Humans were supposed to be nervous, weak, always lowering their heads in front of greater power. But this human looked at her with steady calm, with no fear and no arrogance. It was not the stare of someone challenging her. It was not the look of someone desperate to please. It was simply honest, open, unshaken. She blinked, confused by the warmth in his gaze. Without thinking, she spoke out loud, her voice echoing in the great hall. "Why are you looking at me so deeply, human?" The hall fell silent. Nobles gasped, surprised that the princess would speak so directly. The Empress raised an eyebrow but said nothing, watching with interest. Ethan did not flinch. He did not look away. Instead, he bowed slightly toward the princess and answered in a calm, clear voice. "Because your eyes tell me more than words, princess. I see strength, but I also see kindness. I see intelligence, but I also see someone who wishes to be understood." Liara froze. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Her people respected her, feared her, and admired her, but never once had someone looked at her as if she were more than her title. To the court, she was royalty, a future ruler. To this human, she seemed to be something more, a person. For a long moment, she could not speak. She only stared back at him, her heart strangely unsettled. The Empress broke the silence with a small smile. "Interesting. A human who speaks with courage." One of the ministers stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Your Majesty, forgive me, but we must not let charming words blind us. Humans are fragile, untested. This one seeks to win favor by speaking boldly to the princess. It is a dangerous trick, Ethan turned toward the minister, his face calm. "I do not seek to trick anyone. I only spoke the truth. If that is considered dangerous, then perhaps truth is rarer here than I thought." Gasps filled the hall again. Some nobles frowned, others looked impressed. Princess Liara's lips curved into the smallest of smiles, hidden from most but not from Ethan. The Empress raised her hand, and silence returned. "Enough. The human has spoken with honesty. That is more than can be said for many who stand in this court." She looked at Ethan. "You will remain here as our guest. We shall see in time if humanity deserves our friendship." With that, the formal meeting ended, but the princess's eyes followed Ethan as he was guided away by attendants. Later, in her private chamber, Princess Liara sat by the balcony, staring at the stars. She could not forget the human's gaze. Why did it feel different? Why did it feel as if he had looked through her royal mask and seen the lonely person beneath? Her people were powerful, logical, and cold in their judgment, but the human's eyes carried warmth, something she had never known. As the night deepened, Liara whispered to herself, "Why do I feel so restless? Just because of a human." Far away in his guest quarters, Ethan sat quietly, writing his report for Earth. But even as he wrote about the Empress, the court, and the palace, his thoughts drifted back to the princess. He remembered her surprise, her voice echoing in the hall. "Why are you looking at me so deeply, human?" He smiled faintly. He had not meant to surprise her. He had only spoken the truth. But perhaps the truth was what she had been waiting for all along. And so the first meeting between a human and an alien princess ended, not with hostility, but with curiosity. A spark had been lit, one that would soon grow into something far greater than either of them could imagine. The morning sun of Zephraya rose like a silver flame across the sky, casting light over the palace towers. Inside her chamber, Princess Liara sat quietly, still thinking of the strange human she had met the day before. She had spoken without control, asking him why he had looked at her so deeply. The memory of his steady eyes lingered with her like an echo she could not escape. Her people had always taught her that humans were simple, weak, and easily broken. But Ethan Walker, the human delegate, had shown something unexpected. His gaze carried no fear. His words had been honest, not polished, not designed to impress. And that honesty had left a mark on her heart. Liara's maid entered, bowing deeply. "Princess, the human guest has been assigned a guide today. Shall I prepare your schedule?" Liara hesitated. Then she shook her head. "No, I will be the guide today." The maid's eyes widened in surprise. It was unheard of for the princess to personally attend to a guest, especially a human, but Liara's voice left no room for argument. Moments later, Ethan was walking through one of the palace gardens when he heard a voice behind him. "Human." He turned, and there she was. Princess Liara stood tall, her silver-blue skin glowing faintly under the morning light. Her golden-ringed eyes studied him carefully as if searching for something. "Princess," Ethan greeted with a respectful bow. "You may walk with me," she said simply. Together, they strolled through the garden. Strange flowers with crystal. Petals opened as they passed, releasing soft melodies into the air. Small winged creatures shimmered like fragments of rainbow light. Ethan slowed his pace, taking it all in with quiet wonder. "You do not hide your thoughts," Liara said after a long silence. Ethan glanced at her. "Should I?" "Most who stand before me do," she answered. "They hide their fear, their ambition, their hunger for power. But you look as if you carry none of those masks." Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe it's because I don't see you as a crown or a title. I see you as a person." Liara stopped walking. No one had ever said such words to her. For a moment she felt strangely vulnerable. Then she tilted her head. "Tell me about your world, human. Tell me about Earth." So Ethan did. As they walked through the garden paths, he spoke of oceans that stretched beyond the horizon, a forest filled with green leaves, of snow that fell from the sky like frozen stars. He described the laughter of children, the bond of families, the struggle of farmers who worked hard for every meal, and the courage of explorers who sailed into the unknown. Liara listened intently, her expression softening. Her world was filled with order and perfection, but it lacked the simple imperfections that gave human life its warmth. "Your people suffer," she said at last, "and yet you smile when you speak of them." "Because," Ethan said gently, "our struggles make our joys brighter. Without storms, we would not value the calm." Liara looked away, hiding the small spark of emotion in her eyes. For years, she had felt trapped inside the palace walls, expected to be flawless. Yet here was a human who embraced flaws as part of life. It felt liberating. Later, they sat beside a pool where silver fish leapt gracefully into the air. Liara's curiosity only grew. She asked about human art, music, and stories. Ethan told her about songs sung by campfires, about paintings that captured not only beauty but pain, and about tales where ordinary people became heroes through love and sacrifice. Her voice softened. "Why do humans make so many stories?" "Because stories remind us that we are more than what we are today," Ethan replied. "They give us hope for what we can become." Liara fell silent, staring at the rippling water. She had never thought of hope as something living. For her people, the future was planned, calculated, controlled. But the human spoke of hope as if it were a flame burning in every heart. As the day stretched on, Ethan too learned about the princess. She told him about the endless ceremonies, the rules she had to follow, and the way the court always watched her. She admitted in a rare whisper that sometimes she felt like a bird trapped in a cage made of crystal. Ethan listened quietly. He did not tell her what to do, nor did he judge her feelings. He only listened, his steady gaze never leaving her face. For Liara, it was the first time anyone had truly listened, not to the princess, but to her. By evening, when the sun sank behind the palace towers, Liara found herself saying words she had never planned. "Human, you are strange. You are weaker than us, smaller than us, and yet, when you look at me, I feel as if I am the smaller one." Ethan chuckled softly. "Maybe that's because you're used to being seen as untouchable. I don't see you that way. I just see you." Her heart gave a quiet tremor at those words. She turned away quickly, hiding the faint color rising in her cheeks. When they returned to the main hall, whispers already spread among the courtiers. Many had seen the princess walking side by side with the human. Some looked disapproving, others curious. But Liara ignored them. For once, she did not care what others thought. That night, in her chamber, she sat before her mirror. She touched her reflection lightly, remembering Ethan's calm voice, his stories of Earth, and the warmth in his eyes. "Why do you look at me that way, human?" she whispered softly to her reflection. "Why does it make me feel alive?" Meanwhile, in his guest room, Ethan leaned back in his chair, tired but thoughtful. He had not expected the princess to spend the entire day with him. He had not expected her endless questions, her quiet loneliness hidden behind her crown. As he gazed out the window at the alien night sky, he thought of her eyes, curious, sharp, but also vulnerable. "She's not what they told us she'd be," he murmured to himself. "She's not just a princess, she's human in her own way." And so their bond deepened, not through politics or grand gestures, but through simple conversations, honest stories, and the courage to see each other as more than alien or human. The court could whisper, the ministers could doubt. But in the heart of the Sci-Fi palace, something rare was beginning to grow, a friendship born not of power but of understanding. The palace of Sci-Fi glowed under the twin moons, yet beneath its shining towers, whispers of doubt grew stronger each day. The courtiers had seen the human walking with the princess, talking to her as if they were equals. To them, this was dangerous. A fragile creature from a young world was now influencing the air of their empire. By morning, the whispers had turned into open discussions in the council chambers. Ministers, dressed in flowing robes of silver, raised their voices, in concern. "This human is not what he seems," one declared. "He is filling the princess's head with strange ideas," another added. "He must be tested," a third said firmly. The empress listened in silence, her golden eyes calm but sharp. She knew her court feared change. She also knew her daughter was different from most Xiphrians, curious, open, and willing to look beyond the strict walls of tradition. Still, the voices of the council could not be ignored. That afternoon, Princess Liara visited the gardens again, expecting a quiet walk with Ethan, but she found him surrounded by 3 alien ministers, their faces cold and stern. Ethan stood, calmly, his hands behind his back as they questioned him. "Human," one said sharply, "what are your true intentions here? Do you seek to charm our princess into favoring your kind?" Ethan met the minister's glare without flinching. "I seek only understanding. If I wished to charm, I would hide my words. But I do not hide anything." The second minister narrowed his eyes. "We have heard enough of your calm talk. Words are cheap. If humans are truly worthy of respect, prove it. Show us your strength." Princess Liara stepped forward at once. "That is unfair. His people are not like us. They are not built for strength." But Ethan raised a hand gently, stopping her. "It is all right, Princess. Let them test me." Liara's eyes widened. "You cannot—" "I can," Ethan said quietly. His voice carried no arrogance, only steady determination. "If I refuse, they will think humans hide in fear. If I try, at least they will see that we do not back down." Reluctantly, Liara fell silent, though her heart felt heavy. The ministers arranged a series of trials in the palace courtyard. The first was a contest of knowledge, questions about science, history, and philosophy. The Xiphrians expected Ethan to stumble, but he surprised them. While he could not match their ancient archives, his answers carried creativity and perspective they had not considered. When asked how a weaker race could survive among stronger ones, he replied, "By standing together, by turning weakness into unity." The crowd murmured at his words. The second trial was one of endurance. Ethan was made to climb the crystal stairs of the palace tower, stairs so steep they tested even Xiphrian warriors. His muscles strained, his breath grew heavy, but step by step he climbed without quitting. At the top, drenched in sweat, he raised his hand in silent triumph. The nobles, who had expected him to collapse, now watched with a mixture of surprise and respect. The third trial was the hardest. Combat. A Xiphrian warrior stepped forward, towering over Ethan, his body glowing with strength. Liara's heart pounded. This was too much. "You cannot let this happen," she whispered fiercely to her mother, the Empress, who stood watching. The Empress only replied, "Your human must show his truth. If he falls with courage, even that will teach us something." Ethan entered the arena, facing the warrior with no weapon but a simple wooden staff given to him. The warrior charged, his strikes powerful and fast. Ethan could not match his strength. He stumbled, rolled, and barely avoided the heavy blows. Yet he never gave up. He used agility instead of power, patience instead of fury. Each time he was knocked down, he stood again. His staff snapped in two, but he held the broken piece like a shield. His arms trembled, his chest heaved, but his eyes remained steady. He was not fighting to win. He was fighting to show he would not surrender. At last, the warrior raised his hand and stopped. "Enough," he said. "This human does not yield. That is strength." The crowd, silent at first, slowly began to murmur. Some nodded in approval. Others looked uneasy, but none could deny the truth. The human had proven courage. Princess Liara rushed forward, her robe flowing behind her. She placed a hand on Ethan's arm, her golden eyes filled with concern. "You are hurt," she said, softly. Ethan shook his head, smiling faintly through the pain. "I am fine. A few bruises are nothing." You should not have accepted their trial, she whispered. You could have been broken. And what lesson would that have taught? Ethan replied. Sometimes, Princess, it is not about winning. It is about standing when others expect you to fall. Her heart trembled again at his words. Around them, even the courtiers who doubted humans now looked at Ethan differently. He had not beaten their warrior, yet he had shown something there. People rarely valued persistence without pride. That night, as the palace grew quiet, the Empress summoned her daughter. Liara bowed before her, uncertain of what to expect. You have spent much time with the human, the Empress said calmly. Tell me, child. What do you see in him? Liara hesitated. She wanted to say many things, that he was strange, stubborn, gentle, and strong in ways her people did not understand. But in the end, she spoke only the truth. I see someone who does not pretend, someone who sees me not as a crown but as a person. The Empress studied her daughter's face, then nodded slowly. Perhaps that is why he unsettles the court. Honesty is a blade sharper than steel. Some fear it. Liara lowered her gaze, unsure how to answer, but inside her heart, she felt a quiet warmth. Meanwhile, Ethan sat in his quarters, bandaging his bruises. He was tired, yet his spirit was calm. He knew the trials were not truly for him. They were for humanity. And he was glad he had faced them, even if it meant pain. But as he lay down to rest, he thought again of the princess. Her voice when she said, "You could have been broken," still echoed in his ears. It had not been the voice of royalty. It had been the voice of someone who cared. And that thought made the pain of his trials feel strangely light. For in the shadows of distrust, a deeper bond was quietly growing, one that no trial could crush. The Zephyrian palace stood tall and unshaken under the twin moons, but beneath its glittering towers a storm was quietly rising. Whispers of rebellion flowed through the outer districts of the empire. A faction of nobles, angered by the empress's growing interest in humanity, began to plot. They saw Princess Liara spending time with the human, walking with him, listening to his words. To them, this was dangerous. To them, it was weakness. One night, the silence of the palace was broken. Explosions rattled the crystal walls. Alarm bells rang across the halls. Guards rushed through the corridors as shadows of armed rebels moved swiftly inside. Their goal was clear. They wanted to overthrow the Empress and seize the throne before the princess could rise to power. In her chamber, Princess Liara awoke to the sound of chaos. Her maid rushed in, trembling. "Princess, rebels have entered the palace. You must hide." Liara stood tall, her golden-ringed eyes glowing faintly. "No, I will not hide. This is my home. I will face them." Just then, the door burst open, and Ethan ran in, his breath heavy, his face set with determination. "Princess, you need to get to safety." Liara turned to him, surprised. "Human, you should not be here. This is not your fight." Ethan shook his head firmly. "If you fall, peace falls with you. That makes it my fight too." For a brief moment, Liara's heart trembled. She had seen him endure trials of words and strength, but now he stood ready to protect her in a real battle, a human weaker than her kind, yet refusing to step aside. Before she could reply, the rebels burst into the chamber. Their armor was dark, their weapons glowing with stolen power. One of them shouted, "The throne will not be ruled by weakness. The princess and her human pet must be removed." Ethan's grip tightened on the simple blade he had taken from a fallen guard. He had no training in Zephyrian combat, but he stepped in front of Liara anyway, his body forming a shield between her and the danger. The rebels charged. Ethan met them with quick, desperate strikes. He was pushed back, his blade clashing against weapons far stronger than his. Sparks flew, pain jolted through his arms, but he held his ground. Liara, her voice steady, raised her hand, and waves of golden light shot from her palms, striking the rebels back. Her power was greater than theirs, but even with her strength, she found her eyes drawn to the human at her side, wounded, unyielding, his deep gaze never leaving the fight. "Ethan, stay back," she cried. "Not while you're in danger," he shouted back. The rebels regrouped, circling them, Ethan's breathing grew heavier, but he refused to retreat. His eyes caught Liara's, and in that instant she understood what his gaze had always carried: fearless sincerity. He did not fight for glory. He did not fight for power. He fought simply because he cared. Together they fought side by side. Liara unleashed blasts of radiant energy, her movements swift and powerful. Ethan moved with stubborn resolve, striking when he could, blocking when needed, never letting the rebels reach her. Though his body ached, his spirit refused to break. At last, more guards stormed into the chamber, driving the rebels back. The traitors fled into the night, their rebellion broken for now. The palace halls slowly quieted, though the scent of smoke and fire lingered in the air. Liara turned quickly to Ethan, her eyes wide with concern. His blade slipped from his hand and he sank to one knee, blood staining his arm. She caught him before he could fall. "You are hurt," she said, her voice trembling. "It's nothing," Ethan muttered, his lips curling into a faint smile. "I've had worse." "Why?" Liara whispered. "Why would you do this? You could have stayed back. You could have saved yourself." Ethan looked up at her, his deep brown eyes steady despite the pain. "Because your life matters more than mine. If I can keep you safe, then every bruise, every scar, it's worth it." For a moment, Liara could not speak. Her chest tightened and her heart pounded in a way she did not understand. She had been raised to believe strength was measured by power, by victory. Yet this human had shown her another kind of strength. The strength to stand when others would fall, the strength to protect without thinking of himself. She pressed her hand against his wound, her energy flowing into him, sealing the cut. As the golden light faded, she whispered softly, "Now I know why your gaze felt so strange. It carries no fear. It carries only truth." Ethan gave a faint laugh. "I told you before, I only spoke the truth. I only see what is really there." Their eyes locked, and in that silence, an unspoken bond grew stronger than any words. When the Empress arrived with her guards, she found her daughter kneeling beside the wounded human, her hand resting gently on his arm. The Empress's sharp gaze softened slightly as she took in the scene. "The rebellion has been crushed," the Empress said. "But it seems the true battle was fought here." Liara rose, still holding Ethan close. "Mother, this human is not weak. He has shown more courage than many who wear our armor." The Empress studied Ethan for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Perhaps humanity carries more strength than we believed. Tonight he has proven it." Ethan, still weary, but smiling, faintly replied, "Strength isn't always in muscle or power. Sometimes it's just refusing to step aside when it matters." The Empress's lips curved into a rare smile, spoken like one who understands the heart of leadership. That night, when Ethan was finally allowed to rest in his quarters, Liara stayed longer by his side than she should have. She watched him sleep, his chest rising and falling slowly, his face calm despite the pain he had endured. Her fingers brushed against the edge of his blanket as she whispered softly, "You risked your life for me, a princess of another world. Why human? Why do you see me as more than a title?" The question lingered in her heart, unanswered yet powerful. And though the palace had survived the rebellion, Liara knew the true change had begun inside her. For the first time in her life, she felt what it meant to be seen, not as royalty, not as power, but simply as a person worth protecting. The palace of Zifrea slowly returned to silence after the night of chaos. The rebellion had been crushed, the traitors driven away, but the memory of the attack still lingered in the air like smoke. Guards patrolled every corner, ministers whispered nervously in the council, and nobles argued about what the rebellion truly meant. But in one quiet chamber, none of that mattered. Ethan Walker, the human delegate, lay upon a bed of silver silk, recovering from the wounds he had taken while protecting the princess. His arm was bandaged, his body bruised, but his breathing was steady. By his side sat Princess Liara, her golden-ringed, eyes filled with emotions she could not easily name. She had stayed through the night, watching over him, refusing to leave even when her attendants urged her to rest. For the first time in her life, the Princess of Zifrea did not care about her royal duties. She cared only about the human who had stood for her when others had tried to strike her down. When morning light spilled into the room, Ethan stirred, his eyes slowly opening. At once, Liara leaned forward. "You are awake," she said softly. Ethan blinked, his voice weak but steady. "Still alive, it seems." "You should not make light of this," Liara said, though her lips trembled as if she wanted to smile. "You nearly lost your life." "And yet here I am," Ethan replied, looking at her. "It seems I had a good reason to stay standing." Her heart tightened. She looked away, afraid he might see the faint color rising in her cheeks. For a long moment the room was silent, except for the soft sound of his breathing. Then she whispered, almost as if speaking, to herself, "Why do you look at me like that, human? Even now, after all this, why?" Ethan's voice was gentle. "Because when I look at you, I don't see a throne or power or fear. I see someone who deserves to be seen. I see Liara." Her eyes widened. Few had ever spoken her name without title, without formality. Yet when he spoke it, it felt like the most precious thing she had ever heard. Later that day, the Empress herself entered the chamber, her presence filling the room like a wave of quiet strength. Liara rose at once, bowing respectfully, but the Empress lifted a hand, her eyes resting on Ethan. "The Council demands answers," the Empress said. "They fear humanity has brought weakness to our walls. They see your wound as proof that humans are fragile. Yet I saw what you did with my own eyes. Tell me, human, why did you not retreat when you could have?" Ethan met her gaze, calm as ever. "Because retreat would have meant her death. If one life can stand in the way of destruction, then that life should stand, no matter the cost." The Empress studied him for a long, silent moment. Then she turned to her daughter. "And you, Liara? What do you see in this human that others do not?" Liara's voice was steady, though her heart pounded. "I see courage without pride. I see truth without mask. I see someone who risked his life not for gain, but because he cared. That is strength our people have long forgotten." The Empress's lips curved into a faint smile. "Then perhaps this is the lesson we needed. Strength is not only in power, but in heart." She turned back to Ethan. "You have earned what no human has before, the respect of the Zifrian throne. From this day, humanity will not be seen as fragile, but as allies of our empire." Ethan bowed his head. "Thank you, Your Majesty. That is all I hoped for." The Empress nodded once and left, her robes flowing behind her. When the doors closed, silence filled the chamber again. Liara looked at Ethan, her heart heavy with feelings she could not contain any longer. "You changed everything," she whispered. "Do you realize that? With nothing but your honesty and your courage, you changed how my people see yours. You even changed how I see myself." Ethan's smile was faint but warm. "I didn't change you, Liara. I only showed you what was already there." Her eyes shone as she looked at him, and for the first time, she allowed herself to speak the words that had lived inside her since the day they first met. "Do you remember when I asked you why you looked at me so deeply?" "Yes," Ethan said quietly. "I think I finally understand the answer," she whispered. "It is because you do not see with your eyes alone, you see with your heart. And for someone like me, who has always been seen as only a title, that is more precious than I can say." For a long moment they sat in silence, the weight of those words hanging gently between them. The world outside was filled with politics, with whispers of fear and change. But inside that chamber there was only honesty. Days passed, and Ethan grew stronger. The court continued to argue, but the Empress's word was law. Humanity was now under the protection of the Zifrian Empire, not as servants or inferiors, but as friends. Some nobles still disapproved, yet even they could not erase the image of the human who had stood unyielding in the face of rebellion. On the day Ethan was well enough to walk again, Princess Liara led him to the highest balcony of the palace. Together they looked out over the glowing city, its crystal towers shining under the evening light. This world is beautiful, Ethan said softly. Liara nodded, and yet until I met you it always felt empty. I thought strength meant being untouchable, but now I see that strength can also mean allowing yourself to be seen. Ethan turned to her, his deep eyes calm as always. And I see that even the brightest stars can feel alone until someone looks at them as they truly are. Her breath caught. For once she did not look away. She met his gaze fully, and this time she did not ask why. She understood. A small smile touched her lips. Perhaps that is why your eyes unsettled me from the beginning. Not because they were strange, but because they were honest. And honesty is rarer than power. Ethan chuckled softly. Then I am glad my honesty reached you. The wind swept gently across the balcony, carrying with it the quiet hum of the city below. For the first time, Liara felt free. Not as a princess bound by rules, but as someone who had been truly seen. And as the stars appeared one by one in the night sky, the alien princess and the human stood side by side, no longer divided by crown or world. For Liara, the human's gaze was no longer a mystery. It was a gift. A reminder that beyond titles, beyond power, beyond the walls of an empire, there was a truth that only the heart could see.